Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show Podcast. I'm Cecil Laird.
Marcia Parker.
And we are back for another podcast, you guys, that is going to be all centered around the awesome and now lamented Penny Dreadful Season 3. So, if you guys haven't actually watched the season, do not listen because we will be spoiling the season. That's how we do these. I think we actually tried to do a Skype thing last time when we went over Penny Dreadful, but
didn't work.
But we're doing old school podcasting for this one. And for those of you that do like the show, I am greatly interested to find out what you all thought. So in the comments below the YouTube video, the video version of this podcast, even though there's no video component. Leave your comments in what you thought of the season because we want to hear it. So, because it was the last season, as we found out.
Can you hear my tears?
It was very interesting, actually. We both went into the 2-episode finale night where they just doubled up, I'm sure, because of scheduling reasons for something.
They just couldn't wait to get it over with,
yeah,
apparently.
I guess. But at the very end, there was a surprise ending, and we got a title card that came up and said, "The End." And I immediately was like, what? And I went online, and apparently the day after the episode aired, all of these press releases got let out from the creator saying, yep, this was indeed the end. The Showtime has canceled the series. So this is the finale for the entire show.
Wait 1 second here.
Yeah, okay.
So you're telling me you did not know before watching it that it was the end?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
No.
because when I was all like, what? Oh, I get it. Because I was like, oh, they must not have known they were going to cancel it, and that's why they ended it the way they did. But you're saying when you read it up, they knew the whole time.
The creators knew mid-season 2 that it was going to end after season 3. So they wrote to that event. To that end. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
So so let's go through it, guys. I don't know if you were up on Penny Dreadful, but at the end of season 2, they sort of defeated the witch lady, the witch ventriloquist lady, and then ultimately everyone, unfortunately, Sembe, I think is what is his name, ended up getting killed by Wolf Ethan. And it sort of fractured the team a little bit. And at the end of the season, everyone went their separate ways.
Right.
Eva Green stayed. Ethan Chandler was taken back to America by the inspector that had been following him all season long. John Clare got on a boat northbound, which we had no idea where he was headed, but he got on a boat to leave. And then who else did we lose? Oh, Dr. Frankenstein sort of was losing himself in heroin again because he had lost his Brona to Dorian Gray.
Right. Technically, she was Lily.
Technically, she's Lily now, right? But yeah, so everyone kind of went their separate ways, and I was wondering because whenever a show does that, in the past, like a Buffy or your Supernatural or anything, generally if there's a split up at the end of a season, there's a reason to bring them back together in the first episode of the next season. Not so with this.
No.
Everyone sort of stayed in their separate arena all the way until the last episode. So that was a really interesting approach to the season, I thought.
Yeah.
With that said, we'll kind of try and go through kind of quickly with Marcia has notes from every episode of the season, and that'll be sort of our chronology. And we'll speed through some and talk about others. But Marcia, why don't we start at episode 1?
Yeah, so like you were saying, in the beginning, all the characters are scattered. Vanessa Ives, we find her struggling with her depression. She lost control. She lost her faith. She lost her love, her family. She didn't just lose them; they abandoned her in her eyes. So we find her unable to really cope. She's alone in the house. Everything's disarray. It was the cat's meow. So we find Frankenstein driven by madness and heroin. He reached out to Dr. Henry Jekyll. It was a really interesting reveal. I got so excited when he was all like, hey, I'm Dr. Jekyll. I'm like, oh, yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of promise in that introduction, and unfortunately it went completely unfulfilled.
Yes. Malcolm finds himself in Zanzibar.
Right.
Where he meets a very unlikely person. I would never expect him to run into an Apache in Zanzibar.
Yeah, that was odd. Very convenient placement, but...
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then also Ethan is in chains on his way back to America on a train filled of officers and criminals and a familiar face, He-Cat. She was the last remaining witch from season 2.
Hecate.
Hecate. Is that how you say her?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Hecate. He-Cat.
He-Cat. Yeah, so his always nude but able to glamour herself on some clothes companion, Hecate. And so, yeah, that's where everyone starts. And it's kind of everyone's path just goes from there. What happens with Ethan is the people transporting him on the train are basically all but decimated by Ethan's father's men. Ethan's father is the one that's been so eager to have him back home, and we've not really known why.
Right.
And so his father's men basically take him over from there, and there's a whole confrontation between his father. Should we just go through the storylines at this point? Or?
Yeah, we can just take it where it goes.
Yeah. So for Ethan's story, and we'll just go through each person's story and wind up back at the finale.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the easiest way.
Yeah. So Ethan's father's men basically are taking him, and he and Hecate end up escaping once or twice throughout the thing and having to ride on their own, and they have... Like, there's this really cool scene where they're camped out at night and they know the men are nearing. And so Hecate does this crazy witch spell and basically summons a shit ton of snakes to attack the camp with all the men and everything. And that was really cool to see, that there was more to her powers and stuff than just the evil witchy looks and stuff like that.
And something really powerful happened between them as well. They found themselves in a cave that had the Apache story of this boy or man that saves the world. It's basically the story of the end of days, but in the Apache form. And it kind of gives us the notion, okay, so Ethan's supposed to be that guy. He's supposed...
The Wolf of God.
The Wolf of God. He's supposed to save the world or bring it to darkness. And Hecate, she's there to tempt him to go to the darkness side. She's like, why do you care so much about people? You care too much. You should just embrace who you are. Embrace the monster. Embrace the wolf. And they, and then he allows her to do that. And they make sweet love, and he goes to the dark side. Yep,
pretty much. Well, he does go to the dark side to an extent, because what we end up realizing is eventually they are recaptured by his father's men and taken to see his father, who ends up being played by Brian Cox, who is a tremendous actor. He's been in a ton of stuff. Sort of most notably for me was he played Stryker in X2, one of the best X-Men movies in the franchises. But he is a gruff old man and very angry with Ethan, and we still don't quite know why. And there's this very tense dinner, and actually at this point, Sir Malcolm and his Apache traveling companion end up sort of joining up.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting scene after this dinner that Ethan's dad takes him to this chapel, to the family chapel, I think it might even be. And he has Ethan stand in the middle of the chapel and just sort of look around as he tells the story of what happened the night that apparently Ethan called in people to come and murder the entire family.
Wait, back it up.
Yeah.
Back it up, son. Okay, so we had learned on the journey of him getting to his dad's house that the Apache that brought Sir Malcolm to America to save Ethan had a relationship with Ethan. We don't really know what the relationship was, but we know Ethan is very upset with him. and he wants him dead. And that's why they leave him behind in the desert.
That's right.
When
It wasn't anything Ethan did on purpose.
No, it wasn't. Ethan explains that he was brought to the war against the Indians,
Right.
and he slaughtered this whole tribe, and he was really remorseful. He wanted the tribe leader, who was the Apache, to kill him, but the Apache showed him mercy and instead had him fight for them to save the tribe, to meet his what's it called? Redemption.
Right.
So he wanted to save the tribe, but he told them, okay, you need weapons and you need food. I know where you can get it. You can get off the ranch. And they weren't supposed to kill anybody.
That's right.
But they did pretty brutally.
Yeah. So Brian Cox tells the father tells Ethan, that night we were all in here, and people came in and slaughtered your family, your siblings, your mother, they all died right here, and he basically was like, and now you're gonna die right here as well, like and he holds a gun up to Ethan, and then eventually Sir Malcolm and the Apache show up, and a fight breaks out, and it's cool because they try and set a trap for them, with dudes, but they come up with a plan of action very quickly to take them out, and they do so in magnificent.
Well, they do it the same way it happened, like with the Apaches. They took out They knew where the guards were going to be
by the door
because they didn't change their game plan apparently.
Right.
And so they easily took those guys out, and he's like, "Oh, I guess you got me."
Yep. And then he basically tells Ethan, he's like, the dad's like, to kill me, go ahead, send me to meet them right here, or, and Ethan's about to go to leave, and he's like, I'm never going to stop looking for you, I'm never going to stop sending men after you. And then Sir Malcolm steps up and saves Ethan the trouble and just blows his head off.
He knew Ethan couldn't kill his dad. He was still struggling with the blood he already had on his hands, for being a werewolf, and the fact that he did carry that guilt with him for a very long time, that he was responsible for his whole family to die.
Yeah, and that actually still was affecting him when he actually didn't find out the real truth until the second to last episode.
Yeah.
That the Apaches.
Were you surprised? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was a little bit, yeah, and because in the second to last episode we see that the Apache is also a wolf. And
he was the wolf.
He was, not only that, but he was the wolf that created Ethan and made him into a wolf as well. So Ethan has this real awesome, violent reaction. Like, it's so crazy. I never really liked Josh Hartnett at all. I never even bothered with Black Hawk Down or anything like that.
I love him.
I liked him in the vampire movie. Right, he was in 30 Days of Night, wasn't he?
Right, yep.
So I liked him in that, but that was more for the material than for the actor. But this show is where he belonged, man. I mean, he was perfect for the role of Ethan Chandler, and so so that's how his story wraps up. And then Sir Malcolm, and the Apache agree to go back and try and assist because they've gotten wind that Eva Green is in trouble.
Right.
And we'll get to Eva Green's story. But for now, let's jump over to John Clare's story.
Which was not very strong at all.
I thought it was strong. It was the most human story of all of them. Because what he decided to do was go, when he left last season to sail north, he went to sail back to his hometown, and he seeked out the family that he had before he was killed and made into a monster by Frankenstein.
Well, because he was trapped in the Arctic is when he first started getting the memories.
Right. Oh, so that's right.
That's when he went back to the Chinatown in England, which I didn't know there was one, but apparently there is.
Yep.
And he started, retracing his steps.
Yep, and so he eventually he goes to the place where he was living with his wife and son, and they've moved on, and he kind of just starts looking from there, and it actually doesn't take long before he locates them.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the course of the episodes, he just kind of spies on them and watches from the the loft area above them. And the son is clearly very sick.
Mm-hmm.
He's got some disease. Consumption. Oh, okay. Oh, just like everyone else back then, because that's what Brona had, right?
Right.
So the son is coughing up blood and wheezing when he's sleeping and stuff like that. And there's actually a cool moment, I thought, when the mom leaves one night and the son is having a particularly bad attack. John Clare goes down and basically has an interaction with him. And the son, keeps his eyes closed because he's so weak. And he basically says, "Father, is that you?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's me," And it's a really cool little reunion scene, but it's cut so short and so tragically when the son finally opens his eyes and sees the new monstrous John Clare.
Right.
And the kid freaks out and just starts screaming, and John Clare just has to sort of shy away and run away.
There's a really cool line that the kid said that really stuck with me. He's like, they told me the angels would be coming for me soon, and I prayed that it would be you.
That was a good line.
Yeah. It still gives me tears because I'm like, that is so sweet.
Yeah.
That he's a monster, not an angel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. It's the tragicness in the story.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. They didn't have to spend a lot of time with John Clare this season because it was such a humanizing story. Every bit we did get with him, like I said, a lot of humanizing stuff with John Clare, and the story just got sort of even more sad. There was actually other John Clare stuff tying into a different storyline, which we'll get to, because it was fucking great acting.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait till we get to her.
But honestly, that actor was fantastic every time he was on screen. But eventually, he actually comes back and shows his wife that he's back, and she doesn't have a freak out like he's anticipating.
No, she was excited. She's like, "Oh, there you are. I'm so glad. I was praying for you to be here." And she just she told him a bunch of times, like, you think you're a monster, but you're not.
Right.
That's not who you are.
Right, exactly. And that's why I love that storyline so much, because there was so much good in it. And then basically, unfortunately, what happens is one night the boy dies. He finally expires after reuniting. Like, the mom brings him in and actually tells him, "This is your father," and the boy is no longer scared. And so they're able to be like a family for a night, essentially. Right. And then that night, the boy dies, and it turned into this sort of heartrending situation where he's telling the wife, I'll take care of it, I'll go bury him, and this, and she basically says no, and he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "No, I will have my boy back."
Right. And
she's like, "You take him to Dr. Frankenstein. If he brought you back, he can bring him back." And John Clare just is like, "No, you can't ask this of me. You have no idea the torment that I went through and stuff like that."
And that scene was really interesting because when it played out, I couldn't help but wonder if her reaction, the way she reacted when she saw him again and listened to his story and believed him and was there and wanted him to come back, in the back of her mind, knowing that their son was going to die, and that gave her hope.
Yeah, I agree.
That he could live forever. That with him coming back, they could bring the son back once he does pass, and he wouldn't be sick anymore, and they could be a family again.
Right.
So that's really hard. That's a really hard to put him in that situation.
Well, it is, and then ultimately she's like, "Listen to me. You either take him and bring him back to me alive, or don't come back at all."
Right.
And that is the choice that he makes. He takes his son, and he refuses to put him through what he went through. Yeah, and so he buries him in the water and sets him go, sets him free.
And that was really symbolic, because he's not just letting him go. He's letting the whole idea of his family go.
Right.
And he's moving on. He's going to move forward.
And the problem is the fact that his story ends even more tragic, because the one friend that he had back home is no longer there for him. Yeah. But we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So, moving right along, let's hit... should we hit the League of Ladies?
Oh my. Miss Lily and Dorian
Yeah, why don't you
Gray.
tell, since I talked the first two stories, why don't you tell Lily's story? Because I thought it was actually very interesting, especially with that snot-nosed little bitch,
Well,
but
okay.
how it all went
All
out.
right.
Yeah, so
All
because
right.
you've got it from the female perspective, so I think that'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, okay. So when we first meet up with Lily and Dorian Gray, they're into the London Chinatown area,
Hmm.
and they go to this kind of torture house, and they're sitting there, and they bring out this girl. We later know her name is Justine. They bring her out, and they were gonna just take turns like murdering this girl in this room, like all these guys. But instead, Lily and Dorian jump up and kill everybody else and take her.
I forgot about that scene. That was a cool
It
scene.
was a really cool scene. I was like, "What the hell are they? What is this?" And so they bring her back. They clean her up. She like sleeps it off, and they come to. She comes downstairs, and they really captivate her and telling her, we're gonna have the revenge. No, nobody is going to treat you that way anymore. We're tired of being treated so horribly, because Lily was a whore and she was mistreated a lot. She see herself in Justine, and she wants to build an army. She sold Dorian to build this army so they could be rule as the immortals that they are.
Right.
That was what we got in the first or the second season, and this is how they were going to build the army.
Hmm.
They went out and got
Collected horrors.
yeah, they went and collected whores to go out and murder men in the streets at night.
Hmm.
But
Well, to prepare them, well, it was. I don't think it was just to go and murder street men in the streets at night. It was they were building this sort of league of ladies, as I like to call them, that would then um, no longer that had been under the thumb of man for
right,
too long, and that were no longer going to take it, and they would be each other's support systems, and they would go to help free other women in that situation. So it
right,
wasn't just
yeah,
going and murdering men.
it was a
It was
big part
going
of it
to
though.
free. Well, the murdering
It
the
was
men
part,
would be a byproduct of
yeah,
saving the women.
yeah,
Um,
because they did
they weren't
couple of,
literally just going to go murder dudes, though. Only dudes that were keeping women down.
and they did couple it with the suffrage rights when the women were protesting in the streets trying to get the right to vote, and she had this whole conversation with Justine. She's like, what they're doing is ridiculous. They're just going to stomp them out. Nobody's going to listen to a bunch of girls yelling on the street.
Right.
However, they will listen to a bunch of girls that kill
Have
you.
blades on their
Right.
necks.
Do it silently.
Yeah.
It silently. Yeah.
So that was interesting enough, but what I liked about it was the Dorian aspect, because as this League of Ladies grew, Dorian was becoming more and more sidelined, and this little girl, sort of Lily's favorite, little protege, was just a wildfire, just a little pain in the ass that constantly that threatened Dorian when they were just doing exercises, and that continued to threaten him, and just
She was trying to take his place.
yeah, and like she was taking all the things so literally, like, well, there's a man right here. Why are you letting this man hang around with us? You
Right.
know, and she didn't understand, and so it sort of pushed Dorian in a particular direction. Now, before we get there, another aspect of the story is the sad, pathetic Dr. Frankenstein,
Yes.
who behind the scenes with Mr. Jekyll has been working to perfect a formula that basically de-wilds people. Like, there's dudes that are messed up and completely insane, wild, crazy, very Hydish,
Yeah,
and it turns
takes,
them into Jekylls.
right. It takes away the bad side. There's
Right.
two sides of one person. There's the good and there's the bad.
Hmm.
And Dr. Jekyll has spent his life trying to take away the bad.
Hmm.
And so he has his lab in the middle, like in the deep dungeons of this really horrible mental institution,
Right.
that he is able to commit these experiments.
Mhm.
However, the formula he has made up doesn't last very long. It
Right.
only lasts for like an hour or two.
Right. And so Frankenstein basically has been helping him perfect it, and eventually gets it to a point where it works indefinitely.
Right.
And
They combine their methods.
And we find out that the whole reason Dr. Frankenstein has been doing this is so that he can have a formula to then use on Lily,
Right.
and turn her back into Brona.
Mm-hmm.
Who, well, Lily is who he loved really, but basically he wants to declaw Lily.
Right.
Um, and and so that culminates because Frankenstein stumbles into Gray's house more than once
Mm-hmm.
and tries to do stuff like kidnap her and things like that, and it just doesn't go well for him. But Dorian sees his, what he can do.
And they talked about it, and he knows what his plan is, and he's like, oh, well, I might be able to kill two birds with one stone
Exactly. So Dorian basically delivers Lily into Frankenstein's hands, and which leads to the basic culmination of that story, which was, I thought, amazing. I thought because basically once they have Lily, Frankenstein has Lily chained up in the lab, and he's got the concoction ready to inject in her because Dorian has given her up. And before I get to what happens here, Dorian goes back home
and cleans house.
And basically, literally, he walks in, and all the ladies are there being women and chatty all over the place, and blah blah blah. They won't shut up. And then he walks in and he just walks over, pours himself a glass of wine, and drinks it. And meanwhile, while he's doing this, everyone quiets down. And he doesn't even turn around, and he just literally goes, "Get out."
Yeah.
and none of them move, and he turns around. He's like, "No, leave."
Yeah.
And the protege stands up and gets in his face, and
that was a really good scene.
yeah, and she basically tells him, "You don't tell us what to do," and she stabs him in the chest. And he looks down, and he basically just pulls the knife out.
And everybody's like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
what is
and
this guy?
he's like, "You really have no idea what you're messing with."
Right.
And he's like, "You all need to leave now." And then all the girls haul ass out. And he's like, "Take your gowns and your trinkets, sell them, do whatever. Just don't be here."
Yeah.
But the little protege stays, and she's like standing up to him, being staunch, and he's just like, "You should leave." And she's like, "I'm not going back to what I had to do before.
I'd rather die on my feet than live a lifetime on my knees."
Yeah. And he's like, "You're sure about that?" And she said, "Yeah." And he basically reaches up and snaps her neck.
Yeah, it was really sweet because
he did it like real gingerly.
Yeah, he's all like, he gave her a nice little kiss.
Yeah.
And held her close, and then just snapped her neck.
Yep.
And left her there for Lily to fight.
Yeah, left her there because, going back to Frankenstein, he's got the concoction, and he basically says, "I'm going to help you. This is going to make you better. It's going to take away the bad." And she's like, "That's not all it's going to take away." Mm-hmm. And then Billie Piper, the actress, who was
phenomenal.
at Phoenix Comic-Con, I'm so upset I didn't go and say hi to her.
Yeah.
I wish I had seen this scene beforehand, because I would have had to have said hello and say that was an amazing scene, because she progresses to have what was probably the best acting scene in the entire show of all 3 seasons, where she explains this whole backstory of how, when she was Brona the whore, she lived alone, and she had a baby at one point, and in order to keep food coming, she still had to whore. And when she did, those nights she would have to leave the baby in her tent and just pile up the coal and keep the fire going.
Right.
And she'd make it home in time to keep her warm and everything. But one night, a John didn't want to pay, and he hit her and basically knocked her out. And by the time she woke up, she went back, and her baby was cold as ice, and the embers were gone. And she basically lost her child because of all this stuff. And
because she couldn't, she lost her child because she was out whoring. But then she had no choice, and she carried that guilt with her forever, and it made her really angry. And it really made her angry against men. It did. Because it's their, because he treated her like crap and knocked her down.
But the whole twist about it is that, she basically, she uses this story to say why she doesn't want the concoction. She's like, she's like, it was a terrible memory, but it's the only memory of her that I have. Don't take that away from me. And I mean, it was amazing. I teared up. I had to. Like, she was unbelievable, the actress. It was crazy how good this scene was. And Frankenstein lets her go.
Yeah.
And
I thought she was going to kill him for
I
a
thought
second.
she was too, but I'm so glad she didn't.
Yeah.
It made it a more well-rounded thing, because his line was, He's like, we don't have to choose to be monsters,
Right.
you know. And so she first puts her hand around his throat.
It's easy to be monsters.
Oh yeah,
it's hard to be human.
Yeah, right,
yeah.
exactly.
Or let's try to be human.
Let's try to be human, yeah. And so she puts her hand on his throat, and then leans up and gives him a kiss before running out. And I was like, and that's basically the end of that story. Except she goes back and sees Dorian, and her protege laying there, and all the girls gone, and she's like, so the breadth of my work has come to but this, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, he basically tells her, he's like, listen, this is what you got to get used to. This is the life of an immortal.
I've been through many of these.
Yeah.
And it just comes to nothing.
Your people will shrink and die and become shells of themselves,
right.
and you have nothing to do but to watch.
And he was disappointed too, because he thought it might have been different with her because of her spirit, because she was also immortal. He thought they would be able to rise. So I think when she first tried to sell it to him, he was thinking it was going to be completely different than what it actually came out to. Mm-hmm. And he got bored pretty quickly because he's seen it all.
Yeah.
And don't forget, we did get to see Dr. Jekyll become Lord Hyde.
Lord Hyde, yeah. Well, he didn't actually turn
into
anything.
Lord Hyde. Yeah.
He just literally gained the title of Lord Hyde.
Yeah.
Which was such a cop-out. And if they had continued the show beyond this, I would have been like, oh, cool, maybe we'll see some cool Hyde stuff. But alas, it was not meant to be. It was only a name transition that we got. But that is going to lead us into the main story, because all roads converge into the finale, where everyone is called home to help with Vanessa Ives.
All roads end with Vanessa Ives.
All roads indeed do end with Vanessa Ives.
What was really cool about her story was how quickly we learned that Dracula was in her town. He was in town. He was coming after her.
Well, he's been the unseen force behind the first two seasons.
Right.
Everything that happened was because of this master, like this vampire master somewhere that we didn't even know who it was.
I mean,
they never name checked him.
No, they never name checked him. But I always assumed.
Well,
it
we
was
always assumed,
Dracula.
Yeah. But we finally, at the end of the first episode of this season, we see a bunch of vampires converge, and then basically scatter as soon as something drops.
Right.
And this man,
we don't see him yet.
No, but the man that he's hovering over with glasses, who works for the psychiatrist that Vanessa starts going to, he is Renfield, it turns out. And as soon as he said Renfield, and I was like, oh no, and he's just like, yes, my master, and he's like, call me Dracula. I was like, oh shit. As soon as I watched that, I texted Marcia. I'm like, you gotta watch Penny Dreadful.
You'll never guess who's there.
Yeah, they finally brought him in.
I was so excited as well. I was like, oh yes, finally Dracula. What's gonna happen next? Like, how are they gonna come? How's this all gonna play out?
And then it played out a lot like Bram Stoker's Dracula. Frankly, he tried to woo her. He like, there was a new guy running the taxidermy area of the museum, the dark creature exhibit that Vanessa latched onto.
I really liked the interaction between them.
Yeah.
And he did such a great job, like, when playing with her. Because she come in, they met, he knew who she was, but she didn't know he knew.
Oh, no, not at all, yeah.
And he played it really well as, oh, yeah, you're that lady. Oh, I'm sorry, what was your name again? Yeah,
well, and they fall for each other, kind of, we obviously know he knows more than she does, but she falls for him, and darkness or no darkness, like, she doesn't really know, but she's not trying to look and find anything.
She's hoping. It was her hope that she was able to find love, because she was seeing the psychiatrist who she was kind of telling her story, her past and everything with, and each time she'd leave, she would give her an assignment, which led her to what was his name?
I'm not sure.
His name, like Sweet or something. Led her to the museum, and they had this interaction, and like, just allow yourself to trust again, trust him. I mean. And which was really sweet. I kind of really was hoping it wasn't going to be Dracula, but I knew it was.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Eventually, she realizes that he is Dracula, and he's been the instrument of all of her torture and pain over the past couple seasons.
Well, okay.
But it doesn't matter.
Before she finds out that he was Dracula, she found out who was stalking her because she didn't know.
Right.
She couldn't figure it out, and that's when the psychiatrist put her in some kind of hypnotherapy. And that's when we go back to her days in the asylum. And who's there to get her through this but John Claude,
John Clare.
John Claude Van Damme. John Clare, who is the creature.
Yeah, well, and he was so this was pre-creature.
Yeah, it was pre-creature.
And this was this was actually really cool. You're right. This whole episode on how she discovered who was after her was amazing because she was locked in this institution, and John Clare was sort of the
keeper or janitor or something?
Well, he's like the medical guy, the little medical dude that
he wasn't a doctor. He was just he was more of like a
caretaker.
Yeah,
he was a caregiver, like a nurse is what I'm saying, the equivalent of a nurse in one of those places. And so he would deliver her food, but you could tell that they had a bond because he would tell her, he's like, you need to eat something because it needs to look like you're trying to get better, because if not, they'll go to electroshock therapy, and trust me, you don't want that. People don't come back the same after that. And they develop this thing, but then all of a sudden it turns on a dime. Yeah. And like she gets this weird evil feeling, and suddenly his eyes go black, and he starts talking evil, and it's basically Satan talking to her because she knows, as the scorpion thing from the second season, she's like Satan's scorpion, like she sort of is working for him without realizing it, kind of like there's a connection there that she doesn't want to be there, but it's there nonetheless. And so Satan is talking through John Clare to her, or is this guy Satan the whole time? Like it's unclear, but
or is it all in her head?
Right, exactly. Does he even know? Because he'll go back to normal and he'll be like, Miss Ives, you okay? And she'll be like, I'm fine. Whatever. And so anyway, it continues that way, and he tries to. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and eventually, when she's getting better, there's this entire scene where there is like the assistant, the nurse John Clare, and then Satan John Clare appears. And then a whole different John Clare appears with like red eyes instead of black eyes.
And I like how the Satan was scared of him.
He was. And because we found out in season 2, what was so cool is basically season 1 was all of Dracula's machinations. Season 2 was all of Satan's machinations. And what we found out at the end of season 2 is that Dracula is actually Satan's brother.
Right.
So they're 2 evil halves of one evil whole.
And they're both fighting for Vanessa.
And they're both fighting for Vanessa. So basically, they both show up in a version of John Clare with Vanessa in the middle, and they actually start fighting with each other. Like, not physically, but verbally going back and forth about who should have her and things like that. And it's a really intense, really awesome scene, but I don't know. I'm talking all about it. What did you think?
I absolutely enjoyed it. I thought the actor who played John Clare and Creature and Satan and Dracula, he did such a fantastic job playing that role and really captivating us in that story, and watching Vanessa kind of evolve through the whole episode, where she was completely gone to where she was coming back, and then she takes that step, like saying, you know what, you guys are fighting for me, but I'm choosing God. I'm choosing myself. And they're like, oh, and they have to leave her.
Right.
But that's how she learns the name. She's like, I now know the name.
Yeah, and so she knows it's Dracula, and she tries to figure out how he's fitting into her life, and very quickly, because again, these seasons are only about 8 episodes.
So fast, the storyline.
So very quickly, she discovers that the man she's been seeing is the same one that's been stalking her, and in the one thing, I'm going to say this is my favorite season of the show.
Yeah.
I loved this season so much, but this is the one thing I did not like about the season. She suddenly just kind of gave up and went with him. Like, it's like all of a sudden she was
Yeah.
okay with being Dracula's bride.
Well,
And it was very out of character for all the fighting she's done.
she went there. She figured. Okay, so she figures out who Dracula is,
Right.
and she goes there to kill him. She had
He
all.
sweet talks her.
She knew how to. Yeah, she knew how to kill him. She's like, I'm gonna take care of this. Make sure that the world doesn't end. And then she goes there, and she's like, you know what? You're right. I deserve to be happy. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, and
Let's live together forever.
She lets him bite her, and
Yeah.
and that's that. And it's like, okay,
What?
that's very strange. And that's where we're left at the end of the second to last episode.
Yeah.
And so everyone else essentially catches wind of this. And as we said earlier, they're all brought back together for the finale to try and go free Vanessa from Dracula's grasp or whatever,
Right.
whatever they think is going on. And so they show up, and it's like 4 people with single action pistols, and 1 person with a blade, something like that, and they have to fight off a bunch of vampires. So there's this big knockdown, drag out fight with all of Dracula's crony vampires, and they're terrible fighters because people using the butts of their guns are knocking out vampires very easily.
Right.
It was a bit one-sided that ended up not being enough one-sided
Right.
for a battle, but Dracula ends up showing up, and Ethan and the Apache show up, and there's, like I said, a big fight, and basically Dracula comes down and starts confronting them all. They take out all of his sub-vampires, and
Right.
then it's him versus all of them. Ethan sneaks off while Dracula's fighting the others.
Which is just Dracula just batting them away over and over again.
Yeah.
And which somehow gives Ethan enough time to go upstairs to find Vanessa.
Not only that, but to have a really slow scene with Vanessa as well.
Oh my gosh. It just wasn't satisfying. Like, because he goes in there and she's like all dramatic, like, oh, I'm a vampire now. And, and she pretty much is like, okay, you have to kill me. So I'm like, okay, wait a second.
I don't know that she was a full vampire, but she was.
She was.
Essentially
I mean,
his
she
bride.
was. He was. He bit her.
But that there's so many different
I get it.
lore.
All right.
Who knows?
Well, she couldn't go back, so
Right.
because she couldn't go back, made me believe like
Sure.
she's
You're
already
probably
there.
right. They didn't
Right.
expressly say it, but yeah.
The only way to end all this pestilence is to kill her. Like,
Yeah, well, she's like, listen, all of our hardships since you've met me have been because some dark thing or another is after me.
Right.
And she's like, the best thing we can do is deny them all their prize.
Right.
And so he basically
And
has to,
she just
he
kills
shoots
her.
her through the chest.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that makes sense to me.
The end.
And he shoots her and kills her, and he takes the body downstairs, and Dracula stops fighting enough to look up and see it, and then he runs off.
Right.
And everyone else looks up and is like, "Oh no, there's basically
dead.
our mother/sister figure dead." And then they go and they bury her, and that's kind of how it goes. And
Yeah.
that's the end of the show.
Yeah.
It's very
Anticlimactic.
very anticlimactic. I mean, I guess they have the whole funeral scene where they load her into the carriage, and they go and they bury her,
And
and
the
they have
creature
the one
sees.
person walk away from the grave at a time as they all say their like final goodbye, and then John Clare shows up just in time to see his one friend in the world get buried.
And he's like, oh, I really hope she would have made it.
Yeah, and he goes and he kneels down by the grave, and that's
Yeah.
it. Fade to black. The end.
Yeah.
Title card comes up.
Okay,
And-
can we talk about what we didn't like?
Sure. Apparently, you've been waiting just for that.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to firstly say that going through the season, I was getting really excited. We're hitting so many different they opened up so many new storylines that could have been so cool. Like with Lily and Dorian, the whole uprising.
The
that
League
would
of
have been
Ladies.
that would have been
the
so
Jekyll
cool
stuff
to
would have been
follow.
really
That
cool.
the Jekyll would have been really cool to follow. Even
Following the Apache wolves and stuff, like what would have happened
learning
with
about
all that stuff. Yeah.
and following the storyline they opened up with about Ethan being the Wolf of God, that would have been really cool to watch. Even watching Vanessa as Dracula's bride for a while would have been really cool. At least have her go out fighting. She even said like, "Oh well, I guess me and Ethan are gonna have to have this fateful fight, and then there will be blood. But she didn't fight. She just said, "Kill me."
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, it was odd, and not only that, but they even said, Dracula even says, it's foretold that the Wolf of God is my only actual enemy, and then he runs away. It's like there's no culminating
I thought there was
going
to be an actual
There
fight.
should have been a culminating fight
between Dracula and the wolf. Like the fight that they had, he wasn't the wolf. He was just Mr. Chandler, and as soon as he would walk up to Dracula, Dracula would just bat him away like he was a fly on the wall. Like,
yeah. It was really an odd way to choose
That's
to
why
end it. The thing is, the director or the creator of the show said that he found out in the middle of season 2 that it was going to end after season 3, and so the way he put it is he always saw the story as Vanessa's story.
Yeah.
So once Vanessa's out of the story, he's like, there was nothing else to continue to do. Yeah, we could have followed the other threads, but ultimately, he's like, he even said, he's like, the whole reason I wrote it is because I saw Eva Green acting in something, and he's like, I really wanted to write something about a woman that lost her faith and was struggling to get it back, and finally gets it back. Just before she dies, she believes in God again.
But she didn't.
Yes, she did. Because remember when she's dying, she tells Ethan, Ethan, I see him. I see God. And she smiles. That's what I'm saying. I do agree that it felt completely rushed.
The eye roll.
It felt completely rushed. It did
the
feel
whole
completely
thing,
rushed,
and that's why when I texted you, I was all like, "Oh gosh, it felt so rushed," and like they had to close everything off right at the end. You could totally feel it. And when you said no, they knew the midway through season 2. I'm like, what? Then why'd they do that? Why did they bring in so many different new storylines and so many cool characters and ideas just to say, fuck you? No. I'm going to get your hopes up. Like, even
maybe they had hopes that it would be uncanceled.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that did happen, like, with Supernatural. They said that it was just going to go 5 seasons, and then they ended up going longer.
Much longer.
So, maybe, but I was so sad. Even my sister texted me today. Wow, that sounded loud, but she texted me today and said, "Oh, I think Lord Hyde is going to be the next big bad monster," and I had to break her heart to let her know, like, no, you don't get that.
Nope, that's it.
No, they took him away. So at least we have the comic books to look forward to.
Yeah, we should mention that. We read the first comic book, the Penny Dreadful comic book, and it looks like we didn't understand why at the time, but it looks like it's just continuing. It's retelling the show in comic book form, and it's ridiculous to do that if that's what they're doing. I mean, it looks like there might be 1 or 2 new elements, but definitely not enough to keep it interesting enough where we're going to keep reading. So that's probably it for me on the Penny Dreadful comic.
I mainly bought the first one so that if I ever ran into the cast, I could have them sign it. Yeah. I didn't know that Lily was there.
Oh, really?
If I would have been like, oh,
well, that's because they only advertised her as the girl from Doctor Who.
Oh, that's why I didn't.
She just happened to also
because I didn't watch Doctor Who, so I didn't.
She wouldn't have been on your radar.
Yeah, I would have totally spent the $40 to have her sign that comic book.
Yeah, that would be a good
damn it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it for our coverage / review of the 3rd and final season of Showtime's Penny Dreadful. Like I said, let us know. Send us an email, send us a tweet, or let us know in the comments of the YouTube video what you guys thought. If you think it should have gone longer, if you were happy with how it ended, what you thought of the surprise series finale. You know,
I guess it was a surprise.
Let's talk about it. So, thanks very much for listening. Remember to like and subscribe to the podcast, both on iTunes and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, youtube.com/The Horror Show channel. We have tons of good content. So, and if you can, leave a little comment, rate and review us on iTunes. That'll help move us up and hopefully get some more people to jump on this fun boat we call the Horror Show podcast. So, thanks for listening. I've been Cecil Laird.
Marcia Parker.
And until next time, remember, stay scared.
Sing on.